Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. This is End Time Apostle. Um, Great to see y'all. I would like to continue and go ahead. I would like to read James chapter 4 to y'all. That way we could all get an understanding, gain edification through this process. Please hit that like and subscribe button. We need to push this algorithm out there, push this out there because a lot of us say, that we want, to be with God and be in the kingdom, but we're not talking about what we need to do to change. What we need to do to change is important. So I'm pretty sure, there's probably gonna be some of y'all, that don't want to hear this, which, I'm asking you to listen because if you ever looked with God and the apostles, they're living in the spirit. They're living in the spirit, not of the flesh. You notice a lot of it is denying a lot of things that are here on earth. Because I want to put this in your perspective. I want you to put this in your thinking. Okay, look at how we're living now. We know God. You know God's a holy God, a pure God, a right God, a justice, a loving, you know, a, a judge, the great judge God. Vengeful. We need to be obedient, right? So I ask you, what are you doing? How are you living your life right now? Is pretty much every I now I'm not saying we're all perfect because we're definitely not, but I'm asking you, are you trying? If you can't understand something or something frustrates you, who are you turning to? Are you turning to God or are you turning to substance of this world? For a long time I used to, whenever I had problems, I used to turn to substance of the world. Now I used to seek counsel. Don't get me wrong. I would ask for others' advice, and things like that. But then I had to learn. Look at that. Then I had to learn which counsel to seek. You know, um, and that makes a big factor in life. That makes a big factor in life. You know who will give you the um the righteous answers. You know who give you the wrong answers. You know who will give you the answers you would want to hear. You know them tell you to confirm your actions, what you may not do. We all know that. But I just want to let you know that everything I started doing before, as I was leading up to getting baptized, I started giving into the world or giving into what I used to. I would try to fight it, and while I was having that problem or sensation, I would take it to prayer, or I would ask God. I would talk to God. I would put myself in an area where it's just God and I, talking closed off, you know, and that's what we need to do. We need to do this, in closed settings, where it's just you and God, nobody else. You don't need to do this to show off. This is a intimate thing, you know, and I'm just trying to tell y'all, I know I said I'm gonna be doing the reading here, but I just wanted to give y'all that advice, I used to smoke cigarettes. I used to smoke cigarettes for like 15 years. And I never really liked to do it around my child. I would step away, and try to smoke, or I would, take my shirt off, like wear like two shirts, take the first one off, or I'll I mean put the first one on, sorry, put the first one on and then, smoke it and take it off to try to get rid of, to not have so much of a smell over her, to get, wash my hands and but then as I was leading to quitting, I started to like find out how much I would do in a day. Then I would find out what would trigger to make me want to smoke more. Then I would start subbing out one of those that a day through a prayer. I would try to fight that one. Um, or I would, slowly, surely I was changing it up. I was doing it more in reading or prayer, or I used to watch a couple of YouTube content. I, don't- I really don't want to call them creators, but they spread the gospel, righteous gospel. Marcus Rogers, he does, he faithfully seeks after God. Mark the Messenger, Nick Jones. Those are the three that um, I'm mentioning right now. But I used to keep subbing it, keep coming to God through that, and even though sometimes I might have fell, don't be discouraged. Because for me, it I was I was sad. I was sad that I gave in, but then for me, it angered me because I didn't want to do that. And I wanted to be more, to make God happy. So it angered me. So the next time I come around, it stirred up the fight. Stirred up the fight. Um, I started hanging around, less around, some of my close friends, that I would call my, brothers and sisters. I would distance myself because at the time they were smoking as well, so I would distance myself so it wouldn't trigger, when they would start I would start, or vice versa. So I started really trying to bring it to God. There's a lot of things that we all need to come to God for, and we're so quick in this world to, when something happens or it doesn't happen the way we want it, we're so quick to like try to get upset at God, or don't want to try to understand when, most of the time, all of us living are doing things to not even try to listen to him, to not even try to obey him. We're worried about our will, which, we need to let his will be done, which we should have been seeking him anyway. A lot of the stuff we do is mainly probably selfish desires. What would make me feel good? How would I get ahead? Selfish thinking. And I I really really tried to stay away from that, and it was very hard. There was a lot of things that happened that, it was hard for me to learn to surrender. I was basically going through like a Job, with some of the things that are happening. And I've been just learning to surrender, learning to surrender, learning to let his will be done. Even when I thought of like 100,000 different ways, I worked and working on giving up my way of thinking and understanding what the Lord has in store. What is he trying to show me? What's the lesson that's learned? That's what you want to do. You want to understand what's the lesson that's learned. What are you growing? Like, the more you're trying to trust, that's stirring up your faith. You know, it's stirring up your faith because you're trusting. You know, and it's just a lot. It's just a lot. But you got to keep going. You got to keep going. The enemy's gonna try to distract you. The enemy's gonna try to distract you. He probably may put another distraction in front of your way, or a problem as you're getting closer. It might take you off to make you go back to making decisions that are, you know, not following God, commands, or Christ, the way how Christ lived on earth when he was here with us, in the flesh. And it's hard, it's hard, especially especially when you don't understand, like I be but we have to try because we are we are the people, all of us here, everything we're doing right now, the way we're living, we are all being tested on our faith. We are all being tested on our faith right now. I mean, how many of y'all are paying attention to what's going on? How many of y'all believe it? Or how many of y'all just look at it and just, oh, no, something else from the Bible needs to happen for you to believe it. Like you need to question your mindset. You need to be like, why is it when something happens to the Bible that you're like, oh, it's an excuse, or you're trying to find another reasoning to it when you need to be like, hey, listen, you know, this happened. This is happening right now. This is happening. Why is it, what's in me right now to not want to understand what's going on? Why is it when I go to try to say a prayer or try to read, why am I not trying to grasp this concept? Why am I not, you know, understanding? Like there's like I said, there's so much going on right now. There's people today that they say, oh, the Bible that's old. The building the third temple. They're trying to, they're putting in play for like sacrifices, which I believe one of them that they did wasn't like an official, because it had two hairs, but they still went through the motions. They still burned it. The only thing they didn't do because it wasn't pure, they didn't use the ashes to, purify the tools to start. But people are ignoring that. They're like, oh well, that's their thing, or that's that. It was said in the Bible. It was described in the Bible, and it's happening right now. And there's so many of us worried about, cases and, other things or about themselves. But that is something that's happening right now. And people are like, well, oh well, that's whatever, but that's not the way, and that's dangerous. That's a dangerous thinking because I don't know how obvious that is. I don't know. Do you see how, like I said, like we're being tested on our fate. Do you realize that they built the first two temples back then when it was like heavily practiced, and then they're bringing it in a time when it's not heavily. I can't even talk. Heavily practiced. It's not heavily practiced, and they're doing it right in front of your face. They're going through the process of doing it at a time when people don't even really like, try to process that. And they still don't see it.